Hello there and welcome to Equity Story. My name is David Malinowski. Thank you for joining us today, guys. My guest today is a bit of a legend, frankly. So just before we start, imagine at one point when you are slightly younger, perhaps in your early 20s, asking yourself, what would be the most, exotic business and, the most exotic country that I could start, build, and then lead. Ask yourself that and start doing it. Well, what it would be like. Perhaps our guest today will be able to share a wee bit of light on that. So, Marek Zmysłowski, welcome.
Thank you for the invitation. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So, for those of you who know Marek, Marek is an entrepreneur, business executive, and an author. So, he actually, as it happens, wrote one of my, to be very fair, top 10, one of the top 10, best books about business, about, development and, adventure. So, Chasing Black Unicorns, loved it a lot. So.
Yeah, the English one is Chasing Black Unicorns. I have to bring you the English
one.
Sorry,
so Chasing Black
Black Unicorns. No, you said it correctly.
Yeah. Are you going to have a second book?
Actually, yes. We are in the process of preparing the book for the publishing.
Very good.
It's probably going to be ready by the end of the year.
Really? Okay. Yeah. That's excellent. Hopefully there will be an audiobook as well, because
I actually would like the audiobook to come out first, because
really? Okay.
My main audience comes from audiobooks. I am an audiobook fan myself.
I love those.
It would be actually cool to start with an audiobook, unlike everyone else.
Well, we'll get to audiobooks in a second, but I suppose let's start from the very beginning. So. For those of our viewers who may not know you or haven't read the book, perhaps, tell us about what is it like to be the most famous Polish bloke in Africa. So, the start of your journey and then how you progress to becoming a startup guru in Africa.
Yeah, well, it's not easy to be the most famous Polish guy because there's just not many of us, right? So I'll start with having low benchmarks. Long story short, I'm your typical Polish teenager. I was raised in a very small town, 100,000 people. My mom was a teacher, my father was a soldier. I always wanted to get out of this town.
Koszalin, if I remember correctly.
Koszalin, northwest of Poland. Very humble beginnings. I mean, I was never hungry, right? I'm more hungry now because I'm on a diet. But my parents were giving money for education and nothing else, right? So I always wanted to live the Western world life. Just wearing a nice suit and driving a nice car. That was always my vision. So I quickly moved to another bigger city, get a university. But then realized that university is not going to give me any money. So I went into business, and the easiest way to make money when you're young but ambitious is usually real estate as a broker or insurance man. So doing that, had some successes, made some first money, lost some first money. At some point in my life, fell in love in the startup world simply because it was so cool back then. And I think still
it was different, I think. A lot of people who, sorry, obviously, to interject. A lot of people, these kind of captains of the industry in terms of venture capital here in Poland that, come to our studio, talk to us, they all say the same thing at one point or the other when they talk about their beginnings, is that it was different back then. So it was more like a kind of, Wild West feel. It wasn't as structured, the whole VC scene. And
VC was really non-existent back then. Yeah. We were financed by the money from the European Union, right? That was just basically pumping money to whatever projects you could think of. Because I guess the approach of European Union, even if we invest in stupid project, the money will be spent in Poland, right? Someone's going to make money of it. The money will be pumped into the economy.
Yeah, in some way or the other.
And you could argue that it's not a bad strategy. I've seen worse, right? So that allowed the first startups really to grow in Poland, instead of the VC money that usually tends to be more
smart
aggressive,
money,
more risky. Exactly, right? But we didn't have that. So the European Union fit that void. But at some point, I've realized that I'm not able to take my company to a higher level. I'm lacking something. And in my case, that was my theory. I didn't study much, and I didn't work for any bigger company much. So who am I going to learn from, right?
Yeah. No, of course, you were you were different to these kind of usual suspects, if you like, by Western standards. So these guys who have gone to Ivy League colleges, perhaps dropped out from them, or went the whole right, so went to college, then perhaps trained on Wall Street, got the MBA, and then got into venture capital. You were young, hungry, and you wanted things now. That's why the sort of rocket people,
rocket internet,
found you,
which is like the I don't know, the Y Combinator, the Amazon, the most sought for employer if you want to learn what it means to grow companies fast, right? And usually you would have to be a former investment banker or at least a very good engineer.
Yeah, to be one of those suits.
To be one of the suits, right? I guess in my case, I had the experience of doing things in Poland.
Well, like Nementis.
Nementis, like one of the funeral startups. One of the startups I've run. And back then for Western European investment managers of the biggest European fund of funds and company that builds other companies, Poland was really still Europe of Africa of Europe.
Yeah,
in
like
a way,
the
right?
Wild West.
So they were like, I think you might be good to go to Africa, and the opportunity to go to Africa and start doing those crazy things there really came from my first employer, which was Rocket Internet, which was really not your typical employer because it's a fund that simply comes up with idea and then hires co-founders. So I was someone in between a typical employer and a typical co-founder because I became a co-founder for an idea that was given to me. I fell in love with it. And I was working for the shares, not for the salary. So I, in a way, adopted this idea, and that was the best adventure of my life because I spent in Africa, in total, I think 8-9 years, right? And then 4 years with Rocket Internet and Jumia, which from one employee, grew to 400 and did an IPO, and that was very, very.
Was that Nasdaq?
No, the big one, New York Stock Exchange. So that's in the book. And I always wanted to write a book, but I was afraid it's going to be a very boring business book. And at some point, I had some problems with my current business partners from Nigeria in another business of mine.
Yeah, so I've heard.
Long story short, it's not that hard to bribe a Nigerian police officer to put your name on any list of next to drug dealers and murderers, right?
But well, but the whole red notice
it's called red note.
Yeah, red notice. It's pretty impressive. So I suppose, well, the only thing that I can think about when we discuss this is kudos to you because fetching such powerful enemies so that they are actually in the position to do that.
Yeah,
that's pretty impressive in itself.
Well. I always had a big tongue, right? I was, I take the responsibility of pissing off my partners because I was this young, cocky entrepreneur. My company just went public, and so I thought I know everything, right? And my business partner and my co-investor was a 50-something-year-old guy coming from a multi-billion-dollar family. He was the third generation running it. Kind of a different mindset, right? And
it's all the money, Western European.
No, Nigerian/Indian, right?
Oh, this guy. Yes, I remember now. Okay, yeah.
But anyway, there's a lot of ego involved. On one side, there's this young, cocky guy, and on the other side, there's this guy that kind of represents certain type of value, and no one younger than him will tell him what to do. So I pissed him off. But in Nigeria, you deal with your business partners in a slightly different way. Sometimes you tend to involve police maybe a little bit too soon. I'm just trying to say it half jokingly because now it's all a nice story to me. It was very, very hard for me back then.
I can imagine it must have, being locked up, all of the sudden out of the blue, it
was tough.
It was tough.
It was tough. But the concept of the book really helped me because I always had this idea to write a book, but I knew it's going to be boring because I wanted to write a business book, right? But back that night when I had to spend the night in jail, not knowing what's going to happen to me, the first idea came to me, if I write about this, my business book just became 10 times more interesting because there's a criminal aspect to it, right?
Yeah, it's like a mystery, a bit of a...
You're watching action movies more often than business-related movies, right?
No, of course.
But then I knew that in order to write this book, I'm going to have a happy end. So fighting for the happy end was really motivated by the fact that I need a happy end. I need to survive. I need to close everything. to be able to write this book, a book needs the happy end. And that gave me the motivation to finish the case, which took almost 2 years. And then writing the book was really a psychotherapeutical experience for me.
Like a self-reflection kind of
Absolutely.
thing.
And that allowed me to deal with a lot of strong emotions, depression included, during the almost 2 years of legal fight. And then the book allowed me to close the chapter of my life, both figuratively speaking and literally.
It's also very commendable that you have this sort of let's call it civil courage, to actually go in front of people and say, well, look, there were all these other things that I had to struggle with. So as you say, depression, because I can imagine that it's not living this sort of fast-paced, exciting life, of a startup founder, of a businessman, entrepreneur. It also has darker sides to it. So it is an adrenaline ride. It drains energy out of you. It is like a roller coaster. So
people don't talk about it.
Only human. So we have to kind of there needs to be a balance as well.
Yes, and people do not talk about it.
Of course not.
There's a school book. I believe the title is Leadership BS. That basically says that half of the autobiography, half of the autobiographies, half of the leadership type of trainings, courses, books, etc. It's all bullshit because it's really science. Business is hardly considered as science. Like you can't set up certain scientific methods to see whether something it works or not, right?
That's true.
If you analyze a case study of a company, you can never say whether this happened because of this or instead of this, because you can't have a control group. You can't run the same experiment in a separate universe. At least we don't know about it yet, right?
It's not a mathematical equation that it's kind of detached from everything, or it's subject to just certain laws, and that is it. And it will be true if you run it now, and also true if you run it somewhere else in the world in 10 years time. So it's not like that. It's it's all a product of its circumstances.
Yeah, that's why people tend to focus on the good stuff, and they want this book to also be a great PR article and so on. And it's usually that the reality is skewed, right? And it biased. Same thing with the media. Like the media mostly writes about the cool stuff and
or what sells, drama. Effectively, things like that.
Or rage, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of made a decision, fuck it, like I'm just gonna also write about the bad stuff because, I just want to be different like that. I want to be fresh like this.
That's the thing. I mean, it made it really genuine in my view. I mean, I obviously, my kind of adventures, not comparable to yours, living in Nigeria and, flying all across Africa. I spent a decade in the UK, being there on my own, etc., just kind of from age of 18, going through uni, working in the city of London all by my own. So at many points when I read your book, I thought to myself, because obviously you were also, don't want to say struggling, but you were put up against differences in terms of culture, business, etiquette, all these things. When I read some of the situations that you had to, that you encounter, I thought to myself, well, yeah, absolutely, this is how it would work. So it felt very genuine, and the fact that you also depicted the struggles that you went through made the whole book very valuable, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But parking book aside for a bit, because that's a bit in the past now, and so you've done all these things. The Africa stint, I presume, is done and dusted now. So you are focusing on other things.
Yes, met a girl, fell in love.
So there was a happy ending after all.
Yes, I was living in South Africa back then. I was not planning to leave anywhere. I loved South Africa and
Cape Town.
Obviously, that was my hub for all my sub-Saharan African businesses. But I met a girl who happened to be Dominican, and instantly fell in love. And first 2 years of our relationship, I was flying. I had to take 2 12-hour flights, and then 6 years.
They're talking about dedication.
6 hours difference, time difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was amazing, but it wasn't sustainable. So we decided to move to Spain. And Spain was also amazing. But then lockdown came, and Spain was not so amazing during lockdown. And long story short, we decided to move to Dominican Republic, which is my base now. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I suppose if you said she's from Dominican Republic, right? Well, so obviously, would imagine she speaks Spanish, so Spain was not as big of a culture shock to her. It was probably like
for her is the same,
absolutely fine. Yeah, I mean, Dominican Republic, when I think about it, I mean, I visited once in my life, beautiful beaches, wonderful, breathtaking nature. I would imagine it's a wee different and slightly better proposition to live through lockdown than Spain. So
absolutely.
Fair, so fair play to you,
Maybe a little bit also a different approach to certain roles, right, and strategy of dealing with pandemics, right? No, Dominican Republic. Not sure how much we want to go into private topics, right? But DR is like a small continent because you have both the mountains and the jungle and the desert, if you want it.
That's actually something that I read on Samana's website.
Yeah, which is my real estate project. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So perhaps we can talk about that first, and then talk about your second project. But before we go there,
I'll tell you like the story in between, right? Because lockdown and the war in Ukraine really defined my business life, right? Because what has happened is, after Jumia and after all those Interpol cases, like the business I was involved in was a marketing technology company, and our clients were the biggest hotel chains, biggest airlines, and online travel agencies and retailers in sub-Saharan Africa. And all those 4 businesses were affected by lockdown. So overnight,
severely, I can imagine. Yeah.
Overnight, we've lost like 3/4 of our revenue. So I realized as an entrepreneur, I have to diversify my risk even further.
Yeah, adapt yourself to changing circumstances, of course.
Not only when I look at the sector, but also when I look at Africa, because back then, virtually all my investments, assets, focus was on this continent. That's how I was in love with it. But Africa was really hurting very deeply economically as a whole continent when it comes to lockdown, right?
Okay.
It was the continent hit the most by all the global policies, directly and indirectly. So I was like, I have to invest in something else, and I have to invest in something else, ideally in a different continent. And back then, a friend of mine, Lech Kaniuk, a very known, high reputation Polish entrepreneur, was taking his company Sunroof, which is a producer of two-in-one solar roofs, to the next level. And he was searching for so-called late co-founders. So be my co-founder, you're just joining a little bit later. Also invest a little bit, but most importantly, focus on growing this business with me.
And bring your experience, etc., etc. Yeah, no, of course.
Exactly. And I was like, this is totally for me.
This is the ticket.
And that was really great time for Sunroof, because lockdown has changed the way people spend time. They had to spend more in their houses. They wanted to invest in the way their house looks like. They were building bigger houses and so on. Then the war on Ukraine came. At one point, we've lost all our access to furniture, to wood. We've lost access to our builders from Ukraine and so on. But at the same time, the energy destabilization.
Yeah, and the prices
going up.
The whole jazz. Yeah, of course.
I am far, as a person involved in solar energy, I am far from saying this is the best solution for the world, speaking from the perspective of ecology. What I love solar energy for is the independence. Because if you have a household for you and your family, you're not able to build a tiny nuclear power plant in your basement.
Not yet, no. Not that we know of.
The big, wind turbines do not work at small scale as well. At that scale, solar energy is the only choice if you want to be independent. And I think you should be independent. And it's great to want to be independent.
Yeah, at least partially, right? Because it can be also a nice
at least for the worst
times. To the grid.
Exactly.
Of course.
So Sunroof really exploded. Like we went from a company of a couple of people, 10, 12 people to almost now 200. We've raised $25 million last year and so on. And the company is on a trajectory to become the leader in this industry in Europe at least. Let's see what's going to happen later. But at the same time, what happened to me as an entrepreneur, as an investor, is I really fell in love with the stuff you can touch.
Okay.
Because all my life, I was either in finance or into IT. Building websites and selling services or different type of products on the website. So I didn't even touch the product. It's
intangible, really.
Exactly. And I guess when you turn 30, there's this lumberjack effect kind of being born into you. Like you wanna build stuff.
Create something on your own that you will leave behind for others to see, for you to see. I mean, I know this because I've recently hit 30, so similar.
You're gonna get there. Yeah. So that happened to me, and I started being interested in real estate. But being a startup guy, I was looking for the highest potential in the real estate. And if you want to build a project, if you want to build a real big project, you're not building a condo or a hotel. You're building a whole town.
Okay.
And this is very crazy when you think about it and you talk to someone in Europe, because towns and cities in Europe have been built centuries ago.
Yes, and they've been just kind of trimmed, modified.
Do you modify what's been here for 1,000 years, basically, right? Which has a lot of flaws, but let's not talk about this. The concept of building cities from scratch is something very common in North America and in South America, in the States, in Canada, in Brazil, in Argentina.
Of course,
you have corporations.
You have to just look at a map of. Sorry, this is
Go ahead,
you look at a map of every kind of like small to mid-sized American city. I mean, the key difference what it would be the street grid, right?
Because it's built from scratch. It's designed.
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. It's designed and then built. It's not a product of evolution over centuries and centuries. Wars and
where you can't move the streets. And you have to deal with these old buildings. You can't move them.
Precisely,
Quality of life goes down. If you build it from scratch, you can design it for the current needs, right?
Yeah.
But the cool thing about it is that there's more and more of this type of projects happening around the world. And as a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur, an investor, you cannot not see that there's a new real estate asset class being born, which is cities. If you're a real estate investor and you want to build a nice portfolio, you want to diversify by geography, you want to diversify by having a little bit of land, maybe some residential, maybe some commercial, maybe some logistical office. And then there will be shares in cities being listed on IPO, on stock exchange.
Just to ask you, because and again, I suppose that's part of the reason why we discuss this, to learn more. But when you talk about a city as an asset class, as a real estate, is that like a similar concept like a gated community, but just bigger and kind of
big enough? It's essentially it's a gated community. We're not talking about creating new countries, right?
No, of course.
No, we're being way more down to earth. We're essentially building a gated community that is big enough that can accommodate its own shopping mall, its own schools, and so on and so on. We're
talking about hospital, kind of like all these things that you have in like a small city.
Everything you want in a place where you want to stay for these couple months. And this is designed for people for whom this is a second home or third home mainly, right? Because the world is moving into hybrid work, more and more people can afford it and so on.
Yeah, being like, how do you call it? IT or virtual sort of like, or like remote nomads.
Digital nomads.
Digital nomads, like these kinds of guys. Or billionaires who just travel around and...
Well, digital nomads premium, I would say. So not your graphic designer that is backpacking around the world, but maybe the senior IT developer already that has a wife and a kid and makes like $10,000 per month and wants to spend half a year in New York where he lives or works, and the other one is somewhere more warmer and so on. Maybe an entrepreneur that already has a company of $100 million revenue and he can afford to hire a CEO. So it's like he's like semi-retired but still active, Or your typical rentiers, pensioners, 60 plus, making regular income from the pension, like 5K, 10K.
And not fancying living in, say, Zone 2 in London or, I don't know, in Berlin or in Warsaw. Just wanting to get that a bit of that sunshine, really.
Exactly.
At least like at some time during the year,
I wanted to mention that because I didn't want this to sound like as if this is something like super exclusive, right? Or a ghetto for rich people only. That's nothing about that, right? But yeah, it's a gated community that has gotten bigger in size, and the size makes it financially viable to then invest in much better infrastructure. Also, your own water treatment plant, your own transport service, and so on and so on. It's essentially a city as a service, and that's a great business model. We here in Europe, we never think about city as a business model because we see how cities are managed, and we're like, how can you ever make money out of it?
Yeah, it's like mismanagement, effectively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's the problem of the mindset, because we have not seen how this can be done. One of my business partners, who has been in this business for more than 2 decades, like he has, as a young person, been involved in construction of a city from scratch in California. Who is now, that city now is in the top 10 cities to live in many years, every year, many years in a row. So it is doable, and it is a great business as well. because you don't just build to sell as your typical developer. You build to sell and then keep and manage. And the recurring revenue from those boring services, but very interesting when it comes to margin, like sewage, internet, water, and security, and so on.
So you build it and then have a cash flow from it for
exactly
the future.
So as a startup guy, I'm like, I have found a business model that potentially can turn this into a unicorn because of the new asset class. If you're able to put this to the bigger players, to turn this into bigger investment tickets, or create a company that can build those cities in many different places around the world.
You just get scale behind it.
Exactly. You just build yourself an asset class. And that's very interesting from the perspective of building portfolio. But at the same time, you are de-risking many bad things about startups, because many times I've seen startups valued $100 million today and zero in a couple of months from now, because the CTO left, because Google changed something in their regulations, and there was no residual value, really, right? But here, you always back yourself up on the land you own, because things we didn't mention is that if you want to build a town, you have to control the land. You have to own the land first. That's like the deal breaker, and usually an entry barrier. But if you own the land and building a city, even if something goes wrong, worst case, you're just going to slow certain things down. And if you bought the land well, you're going to be good, okay. Anyway.
You can even, worst case scenario, really, you can repurpose the lands and, turn, the
smaller communities.
Into smaller communities, or do something completely different with it.
Or allow other people, right?
Absolutely, or sell it, or lease it to someone who has perhaps a different idea, and still, either make money or recoup some of the initial investments. So, you should be fine.
And that's what I saw about the combination of the best of both worlds, from this typical startup world, crazy sometimes, but also innovative, and your old school type of real estate world. As you see, I'm very passionate about it. But I love the fact that I'm coming from a totally different world, being an IT guy all my life, and I can add some value to the real estate world. And the other aspect was the fundraising.
You've been fundraising in England recently, haven't you?
Yeah, I just came back from London. Yeah.
I've seen on LinkedIn.
People in London are very much interested in this case. Maybe they want to have a second home, not only in London.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's not difficult wanting to have a break from London. I mean, it can be a bit overwhelming at times.
Or Manchester, or Liverpool, and so on.
Yeah.
Startups have come up with a very innovative idea to raise money without losing power, or without losing control over the company, control over the vision. Because startups usually are very courageous when it comes to the vision, right? They have to do sometimes crazy things.
Yeah, bold. I mean, that's what people often associate, VCs.
Bold. Yeah. That's why you have to take money from VCs or other private individuals who share your vision, because there's no chance you're going to get money for your bold vision from an investment bank or an old style private equity, right?
No, they have a different kind of interest when it comes to allocating their funds.
Correct. And that's the same reason why there's so little innovation in real estate. Because real estate, by definition, has high entry barrier.
Yeah.
And I always say that in the real estate sector, there's a lot of concrete on the construction site, but there's a lot of concrete in the people's heads that are running this business.
That's a very nice way to put it. Yeah, I like that.
If something works, why would you change it, right? So real estate people are used to take money from the old money. Who is used to certain ways of giving you money, which usually means don't even try to be too bold. Don't even try to be too innovative.
Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel.
What works, because it works, right?
Yeah.
Because for them, why change if it works? But maybe the new generation say it doesn't really work because our generation, I guess your generation, because I'm kind of older than you, I guess we see more disadvantages of living in a city than people before us.
Yeah, especially after COVID now, when you kind of clocked the fact that, well, actually, you don't really have to, be there in a proximity, of your office, because you can still do your job fairly well from a more remote location, or even from the other side of the globe if you want to. It's doable. So that brings us to this change in mentality.
If we're designing the way the work is done, we have to redesign the way we live.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. So bringing the startup approach to raising money into the real estate world, which is, I don't have to raise 100 million at once. I can raise first 1, and then 5, and then 10, and then 50, and then 100.
Rounds.
I have rounds with increasing valuation. This gives me opportunity not to lose more control than I need to, not to lose more shares than I need to, and so on and so on. And then you can leverage crowdfunding and bring your future clients into the process. Maybe you can leverage blockchain. I'm not talking about NFTs and digital monkeys and all that stuff and your own coins. I'm talking about tokenizing real estate.
But like title value?
Making it more liquid by allowing for the transaction of smart contracts and not only the whole titles itself and so on and so on.
I had a mate tell me about this idea the other day. Perhaps I should have paid more attention. But
as someone that comes from an IT world, and I was always against Bitcoin and blockchain, I started to understand. I started to get convinced to blockchain, not necessarily the coins, but to blockchain itself as a technology. And when I moved into the real estate, I've realized that if you zoom out enough, that that the real estate sector is one of the sectors that will be disrupted by blockchain the most, as an end game. The changes will happen most likely the slowest, simply because of the nature of the real estate sector in itself.
Yeah, the concrete in the head that you've mentioned.
Correct. But the blockchain, which is being really a decentralized ledger, can really change the game. Real estate value is kept, purchased, sold, transacted, and so on. And so on.
So you mean like the titles and also the actual legal / contractual aspects of kind of shifting ownership.
Shifting ownership, or all those projects when you buy to rent, where you can build syndicates of investors faster and redistribute the money, not by hiring 100 lawyers and accountants, by just embedding this into smart contracts, and everything is being done in an automated way. In total, I'm very bullish when it comes to, in general, I'm very bullish when it comes to blockchain into real estate. Not bullish when it comes to time frame. It will happen very slowly. However, the potential of changes is there. When you look at the proportion of changes, like how much percentage of your sector can be disrupted, how many percentage of your sector, how much can be disrupted by blockchain? I do believe that real estate bears one of the highest proportions.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I believe now. Ask me what if I change that in a year from now.
Well, no, that's what I was going to say. So it's not the first time that I've heard about this. Disruption to the real estate sector that is potentially there around the corner when it comes to blockchain. So it will be. I was actually quite skeptical at first, but I think, as you said, with time, as these things kind of slowly but surely become more real, more tangible to a wider section of the population of the business world. So this idea of blockchain, and blockchain penetrates other sectors, in certain ways of us doing things.
Yeah.
Blockchain kind of becoming a part of the banking system. With time, it might very well get to that point. But then again,
we just have to introduce innovations wisely and not too aggressively. I don't remember the name of this book that I read this, but the quote says, human mind reacts to too innovative, too radical ideas the same way our human gut, stomach reacts to food that is too strange. You react with vomiting, right? So we tend to say no to ideas, not because they're bad, but sometimes they're too radical. They're too different from what we are already having now. We have to introduce them in stages. That's why when you are just a typical real estate buyer, and you want to move to a beautiful city, country, town, Samana Group, which is the project we're involved in now, it's just a gated community. It's beautiful, it's big, it has many cool stuff, but it's just another real estate project, right? We want to introduce innovation slowly without scaring off the clients.
Potential investors,
We want to introduce them by having everyone else's agreement. And so we have a chance to communicate the advantages of blockchain, of different type of fundraising, of different type of energy production, and so on. But coming from the startup world, just to finish, I understand that they have to be introduced slowly.
Okay. And in terms of actually introducing people to this idea and promoting it, I've seen the video with Boris Shit. Excellent. I mean, it was quite funny because I thought to myself, okay, before we obviously met, okay, let's have a butcher's, what's this all about? Because I've seen some snaps on LinkedIn from this. So this whole idea about this heist.
Heist, yes.
Yeah, the heist, and them talking about Dominican Republic, what it could be like.
Yeah.
How did that come about? This idea to kind of portray it in this sort of like cool and adventurous way.
Yeah. Well,
was that your idea? Because that's when I saw it, I thought to myself, that is definitely something he would kind of
I have to give
come up with.
I have to give the credit to my creative director, because there's Boris, which is a very known Polish actor. I'm very lucky to have him as ambassador and investor as well. And there's also Enrique Arce, who has been the actor playing in this Netflix TV hit, The Money Heist. So that's why the theme of the ad is really referring to the Money Heist movie, and it came out beautifully. Enrique also is in love in Samana. He's invested there. He now lives in New York, so for him it's very close to come and say hi every now and then. And the whole point of this ad, and I guess the whole project, was to show that you can combine the best of both worlds. Like, it is possible to have the European lifestyle, because it's nice to live in Europe, especially in the summer. Like, it's rather
it's
safe,
right.
and the restaurants are there and everything and so on. Sometimes you're lacking the nature, and the city can be too overwhelming and so on.
Yeah, in certain places, obviously, the architecture is also very nice.
You want it, and
it's familiar.
It's familiar, and because it's like that's where you're born, that's where you come from, and so on. You feel comfortable, right?
Yes.
So it is doable to combine the beautiful nature of Caribbean paradise and have the jungle and the ocean and the boats and swimming with the dolphins and all that next to your cozy town you remember so well, and having your French bakery next to you, right? We want to combine that, and this case doable if you build it from scratch. But in order for this business to even make sense, it has to be of certain size, right?
No, of course.
You can't get a French bakery for 500 people.
Yeah.
So that was the romantic idea behind it, and that's where we started, searching for other crazy-minded individuals, and Boris and Enrique were one of them. That's a few of them.
Mate, honestly, I think it's pretty great. So fingers crossed. I mean, I'm sure, you guys will be fine, but fingers crossed. And talking about Europe, if we can come back to our content, so Sweden and Sunroof. So, what's the connection between Sunroof and Sweden? If you can kind of, expand on that, because I was looking at the website, I was wondering. So, okay, so
are we Swedish or Polish, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Because sometimes journalists confuse it. So both Lech and his brother, who are the original founders of the company, really his brother is the founder. Then Lech joined, and then I joined, and Rafał Brudecki. They both have Swedish passports because they have moved to Sweden with their parents.
When they were young, okay.
Yeah, Lech was like 1 year old or something like that. So they were really raised in Sweden, and the company was started in Sweden. But it was a family-run business. I believe Karol, in first 3 years of the company operation, has built around 50 roofs, and we have built, I think, 150 just in the next year, just to show you the progress. And obviously Sweden was the first market, but then we've expanded to Poland and to Germany, and then to Austin, Texas, because Texas is like a separate country.
It is, yes.
So coming from Sweden, the technology, the know-how, the initial ideas really come from Sweden. Lech and Karol have Swedish passports, but then it became a much more Polish
international
companies.
kind of.
First Polish, because of the investors coming from Poland and the founders coming from Poland, and all of our R&D now is in Poland. The headquarters in Poland and so on. And then, so from being Swedish company to being Swedish-Polish company to now becoming an international company. We're on 2 continents, soon more.
No, that's very good. And what's the next step for Sunroof in terms of development? In your view, is it now going to be focused on organic expansion, or do you have like a?
I like to give quotes. I will quote Jay-Z now.
Go on.
I have 99 problems, but sales ain't one. It's
good.
all about logistics now, and it's all about protecting the margin. It's a little bit like Uber or Delivery Hero or Glovo, where optimizing the proximity of the restaurant and the courier and the client within time and space really defines your margin, right? Because if you're going to decrease the amount of minutes that the rider is waiting for the driver, the restaurant is waiting for the courier, the food is not going to be so hot. It's all about those minutes and those seconds, because that's what really defines the margin. And same thing with building roofs at scale. The complexity of our business is not that you're building one 100 stories building that is super complicated, but everything happens at once. Everything happens in one location. We're building 100 roofs at once. Simple roofs, but 100 constructions at once. You have to optimize how the logistics are being delivered, how the products are being delivered, and when. So you never have too much products waited at the construction sites, waiting, because they can be stolen.
Taking up time, just kind of.
Or it means you've paid for them and now the money is frozen into them, right? Same thing with the employees. For example, if it takes 4 days to build this roof, but you only need an electrician for half a day, you want to make sure he's not going to wait unnecessarily. He only goes there at the
Does
exact
his
moment.
bit and then
Exactly. At the exact moment where the construction site is needed. So there's a lot of logistics optimization happening on living organisms where many simple processes are happening at once in many locations. So it's a much more of a logistical challenge. There's a lot of AI to be utilized as well, than just a purely engineering/marketing
efficiency challenge, effectively.
Correct. I think this is the challenge number one for Sunroof, not to lose that. So build that efficiency and not to lose it while you're expanding. Because every time you add a new region, every time you add a new country, this might shake the process.
So we've got a few more minutes, but at the very end, I wanted to kind of get us out from this tangible real estate / energy business. Bible super production.
Sorry?
Bible super production.
Audio Bible super production.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do tell me all. So I want to know.
So my book really opened a lot of doors for me. There was this actor / director / movie producer, Krzysztof Czeczot, who called me because he said he read my book. And he was back then making a movie about financials Wild West in Poland. And he wanted me to be a consultant for that movie, talking about that period of time.
Was that about the Swiss franc?
Yes, but that's that movie. But that movie was not finished by him. It was then bought by another producer. So I don't take responsibility for the result.
Fair enough.
Nor does he.
Okay.
But it was that, yeah. Anyway, we hit it off anyway. We became friends. And I've learned about his project. His biggest vision right now is to build the biggest audio production in the world. And it happens to be the Bible because it has 980 potential actors, because that's how many voices / characters you can have in that book. And you want to translate it to so many languages because it's such a great piece of...
It's quite well read.
I'm trying to stay away from the religious aspect because this is really a neutral, religically neutral, if I can use that word, project, right? Because Bible is just an amazing piece of literature showing you the history of our civilization.
Yeah, of course.
And that's what really got me really interested in this project, other than this actually being a good business, because it can defend itself, because if you produce the Bible and then can sell it via the access via app, right? Unlike just physical books. But to be very honest, there was also a little bit of ego involved. I wanted to see how it is to do productions, maybe not movies, but audio productions in Hollywood. We were negotiating with Anthony Hopkins and Gary Oldman.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I had a glimpse of that project. And thanks to that project, I met Boris, and thanks to that project, I met Enrique, who are now my partners in the Samana Group. So everything is connected.
No, that's pretty amazing as a story. So, the only last question, I suppose, that I've got for you, when you kind of, that's, including this period after you came back from Africa, but also during, your time in Africa, when you reflect on all these adventures, all these things, and compare that to what was before. So, potentially, spending one's life working, at one company, just doing, one thing, having a career in like a corporate world, versus what you've done. What does it take from an individual perspective? Who do you have to be, and what does your mindset have to be like to be this person who has all these projects, goes through all these adventures, and has this, pretty cool lifestyle. I'm not saying it's easy.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not saying it's not easy, but full of these interesting adventures, exciting, projects, interesting people.
when I meet younger people or people who are just asking similar questions, there's way less people who are doing stuff and making mistakes and they don't know what to learn from them, so they don't do them again. So they don't do those mistakes again. There's way more people who are procrastinating the decisions to try and do. The failure of this is going to sound so cheesy, and the last thing I want to do is to be a coach. But the fear of failure is the biggest killer of any type of changes in the life, and it makes so many people inactive. Right? Once you start doing, you will make tons of mistakes, and you are most likely smart enough to learn from them. And so I think
actually
that's
doing things.
Just doing, even if sometimes it sounds stupid. I mean, doing is a decision, is action, and the experience and the results will come from it. Just do things and don't make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, I suppose it's...
Try not to make the same mistake twice.
Yeah, I suppose it's important to, reflect on things. I think it was when we are talking about quotes, the definition of insanity.
Yeah, doing the same thing over again, over and over again, and expecting the same results. Yeah, there's something about it. When you're asking such a general statement, it's really hard not to sound like a coach.
No, of course.
And I hope you don't mind, yeah?
No, of course.
In my case, I almost, I went bankrupt twice, and I went bankrupt so hard, I almost didn't make it again back. And what it taught me is that, I think that's what Warren Buffett said, like, the rule number one of investing is not to lose, right? The rule number two is don't forget rule number one. Obviously, when you're young, sometimes you can lose everything because you still have time to make it up. But the one thing that you cannot lose when you're young is the chance to be able to try again, right? And sometimes you can fuck up so badly or go into business so risky that it's gonna
cast a shadow on the rest of your life. Yeah.
Exactly. You don't have a second chance. So I think this is the very thing that being a young, you should always protect.
So smart risk taking.
Yes.
Do stuff, do perhaps things that are very risky, but don't end up in jail, for goodness sake.
Yes.
That sort of stuff.
Wish I knew that. It's stuff like this, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's I suppose in terms of not just learning about your businesses, but in terms of some practical lessons for people who actually think about entrepreneurship, think about their businesses. That's great, ladies and gentlemen. That was Equity Story. My guest, Marek Zmysłowski. So thank you so much.
Thanks again. Thanks for listening till the end, if you're still here.
Yeah, and I suppose it's fair to say either go big or go home, but be careful. Reflect on your mistakes. And
don't bet your home.
and do things. Actually do things, take action as opposed to just procrastinating. Take care. See you next week.